I'd like to welcome everyone to KiwiTech's online 808 workshop. Today, we bring together some of our leading startup mentors to share their expertise in revenue growth, product pivoting, fundraising, and investing. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Karandeep Sodhi, and I'm a senior coordinator for events at KiwiTech. Happy to be here today, and I'd like to start by thanking you all for joining us. A warm welcome to our wonderful presenter who have taken time to be here and impart knowledge to you. For today's online 808 workshop, I will serve as the moderator to ensure everything runs smoothly. Now, before I turn things over to our Senior Vice President Strategic Partnerships, Jerry Balan, I'd like to go over some ground rules. Now, each presentation will be of 15 minutes. Following the 15-minute presentation will be a 5 minutes of Q&A round. There's a response time of 1 minute for each selected questions. For attending startups and founders, you can submit your questions through the Q&A feature or the chat feature on your Zoom screens. Now, during the event, there will be feedback service, and please answer them openly and honestly as your feedback is valued. Through the feedback forms, you will also have the ability to sign up for one-on-one consulting with the mentors. Additionally, for startups that would like to know more about our ecosystem, there is an option to select in the feedback form, and we will connect you to KiwiTech representative in your area. So now moving forward, I would like to introduce today's mentors, starting with Dr. Frumi Rachel Barr, founder and chief strategist of Scale Up Advisors, who would be focusing on scaling and strategy for driving top-line revenue growth. Followed by Arpit Bhutani, who's a senior manager for project management and testing at KiwiTech, who would be focusing on product pivots as a strategy. Followed by Vinita Soin, COO, who would be focusing on investment due diligence. And last but not the least, Dave Mullen, VC SVB Capital, who would be focusing on fundraising. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and kick things off by introducing KiwiTech's Senior Vice President, Strategic Partnership, Jerry Balan. Jerry, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Karandeep, for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone joining us from here and abroad. Thank you for being with us for today's KiwiTech 808 workshop. We're very happy to launch these workshops as our way of giving back to our community that we serve. Again, as Karandeep said, I'm Jerry Balan, Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships here for KiwiTech out of the New York office. I basically cover the eastern states for the company, but I've been with this program since we started. So a little bit about KiwiTech. As you can see here, we're a global community of innovators, mentors, investors, and enterprises. We have about 300 portfolio companies that we're very proud to have in our partnership, and we have over 150 investors. We have invested over 150 million in our portfolio investment through our network of investors, which now total over 2,000. Excuse me. And of course, we have a library of about 150 mentors as well. We operate in the U.S. mainly, but we also have a presence in Canada and in the Middle East and in Europe as well. Next slide, please. So the company started in 2000, actually it started before 2012, but in 2012, our founders were able to bring a previous company up to over 5,000 people worldwide and launch that company back in 1989 as one of the most innovative content service providers in the world. Basically scaling a small company to a large company serving the world's leading publishers, and had that exit in 2012 and then devoted all of their time, effort, and energy to KiwiTech, which actually started in 2009. But by 2013, after building a very, very strong technical backbone in our facility in New Delhi, India, we launched the the KiwiTech startup program. And that started in 2013 and has evolved very, very nicely through today and with projections through 2023. In 2017, we launched our Demo Day program, which many of you have had the opportunity to participate in. And that program obviously was launched to bring our cherished founders to meet funders around the country in about 15 cities and also in the Middle East and in Canada. And then in 2019, we launched this program, the 808 Workshop Series, as I mentioned, as our way of giving back to our community. In 2020, we scaled the ecosystem to add almost 300 portfolio partners, as I mentioned, but we also, as a result of COVID, have turned what was basically a 3-time-a-month event schedule to many more events each month online as a result of no longer having to travel, but doing them virtually. Our goal is to continue on track to become, to add up to 1,000 portfolio partners by 2023, and that's the pace we're on. A little bit about the, excuse me, a little bit about the startup model. Let me just grab some water here. That you may already know about is, excuse me, KiwiTech basically works its partnership by providing technology services and sharing the cost of those services through equity. So for example, in the example on the screen that you see here, many of our startups may require as much as $500,000 of development over the life cycle of their project. And that may mean over several years or a couple of years at least. So what we do is we basically take half of the cost of that development in the form of a fair market warrant and provide the opportunity for the entrepreneurs to accelerate their development, reduce their cost, and through our partnership, through the equity that we are able to assume from the warrant, we're able to be with them through the journey and help them realize their vision as they progress through the various stages that are always associated with the evolution of a startup. And of course, as part of being part of that program, in addition to the technology partnership, we provide all of these other services, access to our venture capital panel, this startup workshop, investor demo days, our family office panel, industry panel, venture fair, techathon, and in 2020, there'll be even more innovative programs, as you could well imagine. As you can see here, we've kind of listed the events and by number, the types of programs that we've run. You can see what's coming up in part of this quarter, which we've already started. We've already had about 3 of the demo days. We'll have this workshop this quarter. We'll have another one for sure in Q1 of 2021. We've done one of the industry panels already. We'll have a techathon, a venture fair, another family office panel, and likewise other events that we devote to special interests and the needs of our startups. This represents some of the programs, as you can see on this flyer: the venture capital panel, the family office panel, the techathon, and of course, as I mentioned, the sort of this very special programs that we run, like for example here, Hispanic Founders Venture Fair that we did. And then if you go to the next one, we have the Female Founders Demo Day, which was probably the first one that we launched in terms of really paying attention to a special segment of funders and founders. And that basically prompted many of the other kinds of demo days that you see here: our real estate panel, our online, and of course our Black Entrepreneurs Matter demo day, which we're doing another one, I believe, next week. Our online workshop, we're really, really delighted to have this today. And again, I'm going to hand it back to Karandeep and his much better voice than mine to take you for the rest of the way. But thank you for bearing with me this morning. And again, welcome. I hope you enjoy this session.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks a lot. And now moving further, without further ado, we will turn things over to our mentors to begin presentations. Now, first up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Fumi Rachel Barr, founder and chief strategist, Scale Up Advisors, who will be focusing on scaling and strategy to drive the top line revenue growth. Dr. Fumi, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I am always eager to share the importance. Okay, start my video. I am always eager to share the importance of spending time to create a powerful strategy. Strategy is a small word, but it has a huge impact. So fasten your seatbelts for a quick journey into strategy. I'm sure you've heard before how important it is to not just work in your business, but also to work on your business. Spending an hour and a half every week with your key people or leadership team is essential to always be focusing on your strategy. Strategy is about top-line revenue growth. So ask yourself these provocative questions. Can you state your strategy simply, and will it drive sustainable growth? The 10 commandments of strategy begin with your core purpose or your why and your core values. I'm sure you've heard before that 80% of all businesses never get out of the state of chaos while growing and often fail. And we mentors and the team at KiwiTech want you to succeed. It's easy to think that the landscape is full of unicorns. In fact, the reason that unicorns are so unusual is because of the 28 million firms in the US, 96% are under $1 million in revenue, and only 17,000 are over 50 million. The valley of death can occur at every level of growth. This is when you need to review your processes and your people to prepare for the next level. Gary Hamel, who is one of the world's most influential and iconoclastic business thinkers, says, "You don't have a real strategy if it doesn't pass 2 tests. First, what you're planning to do really matters to enough customers. And second, it differentiates you from your competition." Start with your vision. Think of your vision as painting a picture of what you want your business to ultimately look like, so you can share it with your team and investors. Clarify your vision and you will make better decisions about your people, strategies, processes, finances, and customers. Create a vision that points the way to a greater good. There are actually 8 questions to answer that can help you paint your vision so everyone can see where you're going. The 8 questions to ask yourself as you do so are: what are your core values? What is your core focus? What is your 10-year target? Your marketing strategy, your 3-year picture, your 1-year plan? What are your quarterly rocks, which we also call priorities? And what are your issues or potential blockers? Simon Sinek, well known for Start With Why, says, "Vision is a destination, a fixed point to which we focus all effort. Strategy is a route, an adaptable path to get us where we want to go." Simon is well known for his golden circle. Your why at the center is the best way to start your path. Simon's TED Talk has over 52 million views as of this week. If you haven't seen it yet, now would be a good time. So what's a why? Very few organizations know why they do what they do. Why is not about making money. That's a result. Why is a purpose, a cause, or a belief? It's the very reason your organization exists. Your why is another way to talk about your core purpose. Your why should inspire you, your employees, and your customers. It's the engine that allows you to overcome challenges, and it's what makes you get up every morning and power on. My own why is to create a safe place for people to discuss what matters most. My why works for the teams I work with, for my friends, and for my family. So ask yourself, why does your company exist? And here are some examples. We all know Starbucks is an escape to a 3rd place. Zappos' purpose is delivering happiness. And of course, Apple always has wanted to disrupt the status quo. Once you know your why, then it's time to move on to your core values. Your core values define your culture and who you truly are as people. When they are clear, you'll find they attract like-minded people to your organization. You will also find when they are applied in your company, they will weed out the people who are not a fit. While an individual's why doesn't need to be the same as your company's, they do need to be aligned. I'm a co-founder and strategic advisor to Scholar, one of KiwiTech's portfolio companies. We are a remote team, and with great intention, we review our core values at the start of every one of our all-hands and quarterly meetings. As a result, we are proud to have a very cohesive team. Macintosh Perry is a Canadian company that shares their values on their website. They are proud of them and they want their customers to know what they stand for. Note that it's not enough to just say, make mama proud. We all know what that means. It may mean different things, though, to different people. So it's important to take your core values to the next level by clearly articulating what it means. Here is the real test. Once they are defined, you must hire, fire, review, reward, and recognize people based on these core values. You have to be prepared to take a financial hit, even if you've paid a recruiter to find someone. If they are not a fit, then they should not be there, in the same way that a rotten apple might spoil the barrel. Remember this mantra: hire slow and fire fast. The little book of emails is one activity to keep your values alive by saving emails that recognize employees who live them. It's a way to recognize people. When I wrote my book, I visited Zappos to interview Tony Hsieh. Their culture book was one of the first things they shared. They're so proud of it. There are lots of ways to share kudos. You can do so in Slack or Teams. The important thing is to find an activity that will keep your core purpose and why alive every day. So what will you do to keep your why and your values alive in your company? Don't let your core values just be words on paper and put them in a drawer. You can make them fun and inspirational for all your stakeholders. In his book, Good to Great, Jim Collins identified a goal that great companies developed and pursued through time and was so challenging that they might not know how they would even accomplish it, but were inspired to figure it out successfully. He called this goal their big, hairy, audacious goal, or BHAG for short. The BHAG arises out of the intersection of three key elements, which he called the hedgehog concept: a company's core purpose, their passion; a company's area of focus that they can be the best in their world at providing; and the fundamental increment or building block that drives profit, what we call their profit per X. Fred DeLuca, a co-founder of Subway, started the business to fund his school expenses. He describes his early success in his book, Start Small, Finish Big. As the story goes, his professor asked him to pick a 10-year BHAG, and his original BHAG was 32 Subway restaurants in 10 years. Once he achieved this goal of 32 restaurants, which seemed nearly impossible to Fred when he said it, his new BHAG was 5,000 stores. His next BHAG, after he accomplished that, was to gain a 50-cent share of wallet from every American every week. And this completely changed his strategy. As a result, we see this with the locations of new Subway outlets, not just storefronts, but now in airports, malls, Walmarts, and many other creative locations where there's hungry traffic. The 10 commandments of strategy are: know your why, share your core values, create words that you own. When we think of search, we always think of Google. Stand by your brand guarantee. That's what you promise your customers. Know your sandbox, the geos, and where you play. And now I'll share more about the next 5. Your one-phrase strategy. It shouldn't take 5 minutes to share your strategy. Drill it down to one simple phrase because it creates focus and acts as a moat to challenge competition. How does your business model drive profitability? What determines how your target market buys? None of this is easy. So here's my favorite example that I'm sure you will all relate to. Southwest Airlines. Notice that all the planes are the same. They're all 737s. That's part of their differentiating secret sauce. One type of plane makes it easy to service and maintain. Their value proposition is their 3 LFs. Lots of fares, lots of flights, lots of fun. And drum roll please, these 2 words are their one-phase strategy: wheels up. A flight attendant asked if they should serve salads on flights, and the answer was no, because that would take more time and prevent wheels up. Their 3 to 5 differentiating activities were their fun. For example, my favorite is their fun and their humor. I remember being on a flight when the flight attendant instructed the cabin to put a mask on a child with the most potential first. My kids thought it was hilarious because they knew who was getting the mask first. These are the specific actions regarding your how. It aligns with your one phrase strategy, it creates barriers to entry by competition, and it differentiates you from how your competitors execute. Creating an X factor is probably the hardest thing to do. It solves an industry bottleneck. If you look at your industry and what is talked about most at summits or conferences, that may give you a clue as to where you need to be a trailblazer. But realize that although it'll revolutionize your industry, eventually others will copy you, and then you'll have to start again. So what products or services drive your top line revenue? This is your profit per X. What are the cost drivers critical to profit that you can control? What units would you want more of or less of? What units can you optimize that competitors are not focused on? Staying with Southwest Airlines, you might guess that based on their wheels up strategy, it's the number of planes that go wheels up. For another popular airline, it's profit per seat. Your core competencies are your core strengths. They look simple to the outside, but you have improved them over time. Your core competencies are the processes, the systems, and the activities that differentiate you. They are a balance between process and people. Always balance process with people. If you concentrate only on process, you will live in chaos. You will leave people like roadkill. And if you don't codify your processes, you will live in chaos with everyone doing things differently. One of the ways to discover your company's strengths is to do the classic SWOT with a twist that I'll share in a minute. But first, a word about groupthink. As you develop your strategy, ask each member of your team to write their thoughts first, whether it's about core values, your why, etc. Creating your SWOT is such a great example because ask each of your team or key people to do some pre-work before a planning meeting and write their own SWOT analysis. In this way, you'll get much richer information, and then you can collaborate together and develop your SWOT analysis. If you remember, Netflix wiped out Blockbuster because they didn't pay attention to trends. So it's important to explore broader external trends beyond your own industry and geography. By examining trends, you will face the brutal facts and the global trends threatening your industry. Assign an advisor or a board member to keep you in the know. And now you can add trends to your SWOT analysis. When do you change strategy? You change strategy when revenue is flat for a long period, when trends change. And so for resources, go to futuretodayinstitute.com and specifically read pages 12 to 21 and answer the questions on page 14. You won't be sorry that you do so. Here are 3 of my favorite books for you to dive into. And if you don't have time to read, then email me and I'll be happy to send you a book summary. In fact, I have almost 200 book summaries. I'd also be happy to share a complimentary copy of my book, which has a foreword by Simon Sinek, and is about how to use your why as the engine to overcome challenges. And now I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much for the great presentation. Also, just give me a minute for the audience to actually send in their questions. For everybody in the audience, you can send in your questions through the Q&A or the chat feature on your Zoom screens. So please go ahead, ask whatever questions you wish to, and we should be asking them to Fumi.
Thank you. The people who call me Dr. Frumi are when I'm adult supervision.
Oh, really? Okay. I'm very used to like announcing the name the way it is, so.
That's fine.
That's well deserving. Just a second. Just waiting for, okay. So there is a question that has just come in. Frumi, as a mentor, what are the red flags you would immediately identify when you engage a startup?
If the team isn't in alignment,
I'm
if
sorry.
the
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
most important thing is for a team to be in alignment. And how would you know if the team is in alignment? If it's a brand new team, it's probably too early to tell. But if they've been around for 6 months, I love to use Pat Lencioni's work. Pat Lencioni has a fabulous assessment called the 5 Cohesive Behaviors of a Team. And that is to be sure that the team trusts each other first. If they don't trust each other, they can't have constructive conflict, which is very important to make decisions. And if they can't have constructive conflict, then they can't make commitments to follow through on the actions that they agree on. And if they don't follow through on those actions, then they have to make each other accountable so that they do. And otherwise, you don't get the results that you want. So it's really important to spend time on what people might think are the soft skills, but those are the skills, the people are what makes a company really work. So it's important to assess that right from the get-go.
Okay, thank you. That's a great response. That answers that question. I definitely think it did. Okay, so another question is, when you say process and people, how do you conjugate both, or how do you involve both?
Well, as I said, it has to be a balance. So if you only spend time and drive process and everything is about process, and you don't take into account your culture, then your people actually fall apart. So it's important to have both. And it's important to be conscious that every time you're evaluating things in your quarterly planning, for example, you ask yourselves about your people. What are they doing? What are their priorities? How do you motivate them? What do they care about? And at the same time, do you have the processes that you need to drive and make your strategy work? But if you only concentrate on one, you either have roadkill with your people and you have a revolving door, or you don't have the processes codified, which means that everyone will do things differently. So let's say you're hiring and you have 4 people interviewing. They all need to know what the process is, or they can't align properly and hire the right people. So it matters no matter which process you're talking about, whether it's operations, operating processes, hiring processes. It's important that everybody knows what the processes is and that it's written down so everyone follows the same thing. Sounds like a lot of structure, but in order to really grow safely, you need some discipline and some structure.
Well, I completely agree with you. The foundation is based a lot. All depends on the foundation, how you really build it brick by brick. Completely agree with you. Okay, so the next question that we have is, what if the team are a group of old friends? Do you often see issues with that idea?
You know, I once had a team that were 7 different CEOs, and they all loved the idea that their new CEO had. So they all joined the team, and they were all friends. They got along really, really well, and it worked well. But when we looked at one of the assessments, we realized that they weren't holding each other accountable because they were friends. So they were afraid to say, hey, you know, you said you would do that, and you're supposed to do that. And one of the other things that we found, because we integrate DISC, which is another assessment to determine personality traits and how to motivate, speak to each other, we found that they were all dominant, which isn't a surprise because they were all CEOs. But in a team, you have to have a balance between people who will dot all the I's and cross the T's, people who will support people, and to remember that everybody on the team is important. It's not just the rainmakers, it's the support people as well, the customer frontline people. If everyone isn't happy, you know, the company won't succeed.
Right. Thank you so much for me for those responses. We do have a lot of questions that have come in. What we will share them via email with you and share the responses with the audience as well. So thank you so much for your time. It was a great presentation. And now I would be moving on to our next presenter.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so for our next presentation, to talk about product pivots as a strategy, I would like to invite Mr. Arpit Bhutani, Senior Manager of Product Management and Tech in KiwiTech. Thank you.
Right. Hi, everyone. Right. I'll just get started. So good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Arpit Bhutani, and I head the PMO and testing function at KiwiTech as Senior Manager. I've spent about 10 years in the industry, and I've been with KiwiTech since the past since over 3 years. And throughout this time, I've learned about over 200 startups. And as of now, at any given point at KiwiTech, there are about 60 to 70 projects ongoing. And out of those, I know that about 20 or so have pivoted, to a different direction, especially during the time of this pandemic. So we're here to talk about products pivots as a strategy, with some focus on the situation that we are in today, which is the pandemic situation. So first things first, I'd want to start on a positive note. A few months ago, Sundar Pichai gave a commencement speech on YouTube to the students graduating in 2020. He left them with a message that said that the ones who remain open, impatient, and hopeful are the ones who will prevail. And I'd like to start this presentation on the same note. I'd like to remind everyone that we went through the influenza pandemic 100 years ago. There was the Great Recession just over a decade ago, and we came out of it stronger and better. Just take a moment to appreciate the names that you see on the screen. These are all big brands, and they were all established during the Great Recession a little over a decade ago. Moving on with the topic, let's understand what a pivot really is and why is it important. So first, I mean, it's kind of a loosely used term, especially in the startup world. You hear the word pivot, so frequently. So just not going by the dictionary meaning of it. From the business sense, pivoting essentially means stepping up in a positive direction. It could be a small or a big change for horizontal or vertical expansion. It could be a planned move, or it could be an unplanned move that's affected by circumstances around you. But essentially, that's what pivoting means for our topic of discussion today. One thing I do want to, share is that it is not the new normal. Pivoting is not the new normal. It is something that has always existed. It's basically how a business grows. And why is it important? Again, for the same reasons. It's how you grow and expand in your business. It's how you adapt to the changing markets. Now let's quickly rush through the most popular pivots that we know of today. And I'm going to discuss about a few applications really quickly. So Netflix, for example, it was originally a meal order service through which customers could order of today. Slack was essentially was initially the team was working on a video game called Glitch, and they were working on an internal chat tool within the game, but they realized the importance of a good chatting platform in the market. They understood the need for it, and they ditched Glitch, and they focused their attention and built the Slack that we know of today. YouTube was essentially meant to be a dating website, if you can believe it. People could come online and record videos of themselves on what are their likes and dislikes and what are the kind of people they're interested in. Uh, but it later pivoted to the biggest streaming service that we know of today. Twitter essentially initially started with an app called Audio, which was meant for podcasts. But Apple Podcasts came in the market and they were dominating it. So they had to pivot to another product altogether, but that didn't work out either. And eventually they were at a place that they had 2 weeks to either Twitter was born. So I just wanted to lay these examples out to show that the original intent of these was not to build what they eventually did. It took one pivot after the other that got them here. Now, let's talk about the types of pivots. So pivots could be unrelated to your business. They could be an addition to your existing business. They could be small. They could be big. So that everybody can relate with the example. Let's use Apple as a case study, and what they've done recently. So a year ago, Apple launched their credit card services, and a few years from now, we'll have an Apple Car. That they've been working on it for quite some time. So that's an unrelated pivot to their existing business. It's a pivot unrelated to their core business, and it's a big pivot. Similarly, on the same lines, a couple of days ago, they launched their M1 chip for their laptops, and they're ditching the Intel processors. That falls under addition to their existing business, but still a big pivot. They'll have more control and enhanced performance and efficiency with these chips. And a good example, using the same case study of Apple, of a small pivot, which is still, addition to their existing business, is recently they brought in a feature to iMessage where you can reply to specific messages, something that existed in WhatsApp and so many other chatting services already, but they pivoted, gave the users what they want, and brought this feature in from iOS 14 onwards. Now, let's talk about the most important part of our discussion, which is how do you identify the right pivot? But just before we dive into that, let's talk about some prerequisites. And these are, more in line with the pandemic situation that we're in. Some of you, because, it's been a few months, so some of you might have taken these steps already. But for those of you who are in the process or haven't started yet, these few prerequisites are important to discuss. So to begin with, the first things first, you have to stop the leak in your business. You need to go back to the drawing board, assess which clients have you lost for good, probably, which could be brought back on board, which are shaky and may need some convincing to remain with you, which vendors may be going under, how does your marketing and sales strategy need to change? And if you're a startup with a product under development, this is the best time to reassess your feature set. I have a very good example here. We at KiwiTech, we worked on an app that connected the users to the chefs, not restaurants, but the chefs directly. Users could order food from the chefs, or they could book chefs for personal events. But when the pandemic hit, they trimmed down their feature scope. They got rid of the features that were regarding booking the chef for events because of social distancing, while they continued with the feature of ordering food. And with how things turned out, they're doing really, really well. They spent that additional money that they had on sales and marketing. And that was, an example of how they stopped the leak. Another prerequisite the next is to switch to recovery mode. Once you've bandaged the open wounds, you need to figure out how to move forward. You may still have customers, assets, talented employees, and ongoing business partnerships. You must ask yourself, how can you reinvent these relationships in new ways? How can you bring in and adopt new technology? How can you do things today to keep revenues flowing, keep your people employed, keep your customers engaged, and keep stakeholders and investors on side? So you'll need to take a look at the world with a fresh pair of eyes, find out how it has changed for you before you find your place in it again. And the last prerequisite is this is more to do with your mental state and your planning. So you seize the opportunity and get back to business. Understand that every crisis is made up of smaller crises that you have to keep putting out fires and solving new problems on a daily basis as you pivot. Execute knowing that every crisis brings real opportunities. Only if you're in a good mental state, you will be able to formulate a clear plan for the future on how you'll be able to prioritize and manage your limited resources effectively. Remember that getting back into business will be a gradual process. Your sales team, for instance, can get back to pitching deals almost as soon as you've hatched a strategic plan for them, while your finance team may need a bit of a longer runway. So it's important to manage that reality carefully strategy. Either way you go, what you need to ensure is that your pivot aligns with one or more of the long-term trends that have been created or have been intensified by the pandemic. And these trends include things such as remote work, shorter supply chains, social distancing, consumer introspection, and of course, enhanced use of technology. Now, the second step is to make sure you're playing on your existing strengths. A good example here is of how Skype and Google Meet is playing catch up with Zoom. Zoom exploded during this time, and we see new features coming in Skype and Google Meets. Even WhatsApp has a feature now where you can schedule meetings among certain people. They're essentially communication tools that are playing on their strengths and pivoting according to the needs of the market. So I'd like to use some examples in the startup world on how they identified their needs and played on their existing strengths. So this slide talks about an app that's a startup. They were into rapid diagnostic tests. You have those test kits that show results from your test results from your blood sample. So they had an app that scans these test kits and shows the results on the screen in a simple format, because these kits could be often hard to read. So with the pandemic, they developed a standalone app for COVID testing that read tests from over 120 different manufacturers worldwide. That's how they pivoted. Another good example is of this app. They essentially provided their users with a smart ID in the form of a QR code that allows the users to log in to other websites, without needing a password. So, and it also allowed you to make payments. So, when the pandemic hit, they pivoted and they shook hands with other diagnostic testing apps and integrated the patient's test results within their QR code Smart ID. So that QR code can now be used to verify whether the person is safe to do certain activities like traveling, going back to work, or entering certain premises. Another great example is of this location tracking app, which was meant to track the location of your friends, family, and coworkers for their safety. But with the pandemic, they pivoted and became a contact tracing app. They're officially now the official app for contact tracing nationwide in Israel, and they have 2 million plus downloads. And one last example that I'd want to share with you, this app is similar to Ticketmaster, but without Ticketmaster in between. So it lets the artists and the fans connect directly for events. Artists could sell their own tickets, fans could buy them directly, which would mean cheaper tickets for fans and higher profits for artists. So a brilliant idea. But with the pandemic, these events are not happening anymore. Thankfully, they were under development and they pivoted, they changed their feature set. And now this app is more about live streaming of events. The heart of it remains the same. The artists and the fans connect, but all of these events are happening on the app now. Now, moving on, the third step for identifying the right pivot, you must understand that timing is essential. And I'd like to use Instagram as an example here, because it's probably the best example of this decade of how a product that made one successful pivot after the other and simply nailed the timing. Some of their biggest pivots were inspired by their competition. There was an app called Wine that came after Instagram and started gaining some traction. It was just like Instagram, but it was owned by Twitter actually. And it was just like Instagram, but instead of pictures, it had videos that you could play in a loop for a few seconds. Instagram simply brought in a feature. They realized that it's gaining traction. They brought in a feature to incorporate videos within Instagram, and successfully taking away a lot of users from Vine. Vine does not exist anymore. So a bigger takedown was Snapchat. Instagram and Snapchat started a year apart, and they were both very popular. But when Instagram was at its peak, and so was Snapchat, Instagram brought in a feature called Instagram Stories that essentially stole the heart of the app and changed it into a feature within Instagram. And it was so rightly implemented and so aggressively implemented by Facebook that it was there on Facebook, on Instagram, on WhatsApp. It was everywhere. Even other companies adopted to it. Even YouTube has stories now. Netflix mobile app shows you movie trailers in a story format. And the recent and a big one is TikTok. TikTok gained billions of users over the past few years. And Instagram recently launched a feature called Instagram Reels that essentially does everything that TikTok does. And with the pandemic, TikTok got banned being a Chinese app in multiple nations, India being one of them. India had the second largest users of TikTok that have all transitioned to Instagram. I mean, there may have been some bit of luck involved. They might not have known this would happen, but either way, the timing was brilliant. It's important to know that you can't always get this right. There's a bit of risk involved. A sob story is of Google on how they introduced Google Allo and Duo to compete with iMessage and FaceTime from iOS, but they brought these apps in 2016 5-6 years after the iOS apps were there, and they were too late to the party. Similarly, in the music industry, YouTube Music could have been the go-to streaming service, considering YouTube's database, Google's database and libraries. But they had Google Play Music before YouTube Music. It never beat Spotify and Pandora. Apple Music and YouTube Music launched in the same year, but Apple Music does so much better. So it's a pivot badly timed and unsuccessful. The last point would be to ensure that whatever pivot you're taking is, it offers a sustainable path to profitability. That should be the main goal. It's important to realize that while the economic crisis that got triggered by the pandemic may not necessarily spell the end of entire industries or companies, but it will certainly weed out business models that fail to pivot towards the new reality, which is being characterized by the same traits that I mentioned: shorter supply chains, remote work, social distancing, etc. Now, I'd like to end this presentation with a question: is it necessary to pivot? And the answer to that is an absolute resounding yes. There's no other way to grow. There's no other way to stay in the game. Is it necessary to pivot during the pandemic? Maybe no. It would depend on your business. It would depend how you got impacted. If you're unsure, it is better to wait and watch, because pivots come with risks, of course. But in general, pivoting is important in one form or the other, irrespective of the current crisis. I'd like to leave you with a concluding thought that we must understand that in any business, even if you have a good revenue flow and even if you're profitable, if you're stagnant, if you're not expanding, you're rather falling behind. You have to constantly grow. You have to run to even stay where you are and keep pace with your competition. And you have to fly to overtake your competition. And it's one pivot at a time that gets you there. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. I'll be happy to take some questions now.
Thank you for the great presentation, Arpit. I think that was very informative and very descriptive as well. Okay, so I will let the audience send in their questions to the Q&A or the chat feature on their Zoom screens. Okay, so there's a question that has just come in. So startup founders typically get fixated on the new product that everyone has come together to build. What are some of the early warning signs to look for?
I mean, if I'm getting the question right, if the person asking is asking on what are the early signs to look for to whether to, go on board or not, or
Right.
to maybe avoid it. So that would highly depend on, so a great sign is, of course, the adoption by the users. What the number of users and the number of the users that are being retained by, say, something that came new in the market is a good sign for you to incorporate some of those things that the new product has brought in, especially if you're in the same domain. Going back to the Instagram example, their biggest pivots were inspired by their competition. They noticed how apps like Vine and Snapchat and TikTok are gaining traction, and they pivoted and incorporated things that they didn't jump instantly. A good example is of an app called Prisma that launched a few years after Instagram, and it challenged the core of Instagram, that you can apply filters to your photos, etc. It got really popular, but Instagram didn't jump to it instantly. They waited, they watched, they saw if people are still interested or if they've gotten bored and stepped away to another app, which is actually what happened with Prisma. And Instagram never incorporated those features. So as a concluding note, I'd say that don't jump ship or incorporate those features immediately. A lot of these new things that come in the market, it's easy to get bored from them for new customers. So keep a good eye on and retaining over time.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks a lot. Okay. Another question is, any suggestions on whether or not how to pivot when in an early stage and you don't have enough funding for the first product yet?
Right. Things are more gray when you're under development. You study the market and analyze your competition. and you incorporate features in your application accordingly, which are essentially small pivots at a time. The example that I gave of the app that moved to online streaming of events. But your true test, and this will always hold true, your true test is when you launch in the market, when the users respond, and you pivot based on the users' response. So you gain practical knowledge when you launch. So you must of course do your best in studying the market while you're under development, but you'll truly know the next direction or the next pivot once your app is in the market and some of the users, early adopters, have given you some feedback.
All right, that's some really great insights, Arpit. Thanks a lot for those responses. We do have a lot of questions coming in, Arpit. We will be sending them via email to you. And of course, your responses would be shared with the audience who asked the questions as well. So thank you so much for your time. And now we would be moving on to the next presenter. But before we move on to the next presenter, I would like the audiences to get their attention to the Zoom screens. You can see our upcoming on Black Entrepreneurs Matter online demo day that we are hosting on November 17th from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. ET. We are hosting a great panel discussion and some of our strongest sounding founding partners for these companies as well. So hope to see you guys there and hope to have you there. Okay, so now moving on to our next presenter, discussing about the investment due diligence, I would like to invite Vinita Soin, COO. Vinita, could we please have you on?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, and good evening for people around the world. I know different time zones. Thank you for taking the time to attend this session and hearing us out. There's so much that goes on, so much noise. It's very important to keep focused on what your company needs and what you need. Great. Thank you so much. Let's start with a short about me and Trivium. Trivium has been supporting the small and medium-sized businesses across the globe, taking care of their accounting, finance, HR, and tax compliances for over a decade now. I have been with the company since prior to when it was incorporated, and I'm very happy to share my learnings through my experiences of handling over 50 due diligence activities in the last 10 years, whether it be for fundraising, merger and acquisition, or pre-IPO. When do companies face due diligence? Every company needs fund, as we all know, to start the operations, to continue the operations, and to grow them. These funds could come from various sources, typically to begin with from the founder's own pockets, family and friends, some angels, but more often than not, very soon the companies need to seek more capital from people or organizations with deeper pockets. And that's when they start reaching out to the bankers, VCs, and finally the public. The process of seeking and gaining venture capital is a grueling one that will consume the time and energy of everyone involved, and which normally would be committed to the business. It's not a very happy process, but the end results are worth it. Getting it done successfully how means the key to growth and survival of your business and your dream. The better the company is prepared for these processes, the swifter would be the outcome and resulting in acquiring of the much needed capital for the company. What is due diligence? It is essentially an investigation primarily conducted by any party who is interested in investing in your company or to even to acquire the company. It is a process to confirm all the facts about the company regarding the products or services provided by the company, what are the past and present, how was the performance of the company, what is the financial status of the company, what is the record keeping status of the company, compliance status of the company, and anything else that could be material. Due diligence happens in various phases, as we all know. The first would be a product due diligence. The VCs usually come to the table, or the investors come to the table because they like the product or the idea or the services being offered by the company. Once that is, once we're beyond that, it is the financial due diligence stage, which is a very key stage in the due diligence process. Um, what is financial due diligence? It is the investigative analysis of a company. It is to assess the key monetary issues facing the business. Um, what are the drivers behind maintainable profits and cash flows? Those are analyzed. The key financial risks are identified, highlighted, and analyzed. This stage could be, as I said, it's a very important stage, and it could be a potential deal breaker of the transaction. Um, why do the deals fall during this transaction? Because primarily, most of the time, the investors find something that company failed to reveal intentionally or accidentally. The whole value of due diligence is at the stage where the investors are looking to see that there are no holes and that their money is going to the safe hands. Complete honesty with the potential investors through the courtship stages, through the pre due diligence stage, and through the technical due diligence stage greatly increases the chances of surviving this stage and gaining that much needed capital for the company. What are the key factors considered pre-investment by the VCs or anybody who's investing? How much is the company valued at? What's the customer acquisition cost for the company? What can the investor expect to get paid back? 2x, 5x, 10x. Now everybody expects 10x at least. When can the investor expect to get paid back? 2 years, 5 years? What is the length that they are investing their money for? Is the money machine working? Do the founders know their business, competitors, and industry? Do the founders believe in keeping the company healthy and compliant? Do the founders believe in incorporating proper HR processes so to keep their key asset, their employees, happy? These are all the things that they are looking very carefully at while considering investing their hard-earned money into your company. Typically, prior to the due diligence process, there is a checklist that is given. If we are aware of this checklist, we can keep the company ready with taking care of all these different aspects and making sure that we have put them in the right place, so that when the time comes, we are not scrambling to put it together and we are ready. This checklist includes your historical financials, your business model, your financial projections. Your folders with your general legal, corporate, and compliance matters should be ready. Your general overview of your assets, where they're kept, how they're tagged, who is using them, who is holding them, is very important. The list and details of materials that are used in the company, the contracts that are drawn between different parties, and the arrangements that might be there in place have to be documented and kept available. Organization chart of the company, where each employee stands, how the team is cohesively presented, is very important. Intellectual property related documents, they are very important. Your IP should be safe. That's what people are looking at. Your insurance binders and information that you have taken the risk mitigation steps and kept your company compliant in different states, and you're following the local and state regulations. um, geographical uh, Geographical regulations, any litigation related material. Hopefully nobody has that, but in case there is anything going on, it's important to disclose it upfront. Any technology related material, your structure of the company, where all the company is located. Are there any subsidiaries? Are there contractors being used internationally? All that information is important. And then in the end, your cap table. Your cap table should be impeccable, giving proper details of what is in there. As and when required, you should be able to present it neatly. Typically, the VCs hire financial experts to conduct the due diligences. These financial experts could be outsourced or in-house for the VC firms. And these financial experts are trained to follow proper guidelines while performing the due diligence. What are those guidelines? It's very important to be aware of those so that we can prepare and be ready for what the people are looking at, for what the VCs are looking at. First and foremost guideline, the most important thing that they look at is the management team. Management team are the pillars of the company, and they contribute immensely to the value of the company. Weak management team leads to weak results. VCs look to interview the top management people of the company and look for signs of indecisiveness, unorganization, infighting, grudges, etc. If they see any potential problem and don't see a sensible solution to it, they will walk away. Your management team your is as important as your product. An idea, a great plan can only be successful if the execution is great, and execution is made possible uh, successfully only by a strong team. So cannot stress enough on how the team should come across, how you have to prepare. If you're going for raising funds, make sure that everybody in the team is on the same page and the whole team comes across as being in it together. The second important factor that they look at is the financials of the company. The VCs and investors are advised to hire experts to review the financials of the company um, line item wise, making sure that they understand the workings of the company and with how the cash flow goes. With many profitable companies going bankrupt, the notion of digging deep into the nature of expenses that the companies make, the reason for the expenses, and how the management of these expense is happening has become stronger in past few years. What do they look for when they're reviewing the financials? The three most important financial statements of your company are your income statement, your balance sheet, and your cash flow statement. Um, it used to be that the income statement was given most importance to understand what the burn rate is like, where the people are spending money, how they're spending money. But with with more understanding of the industry and how the whole debt structure works, balance sheet has become a very, very important uh, document or statement to be reviewed as well. Um, the balance sheet is scrutinized to figure out if the company has any outstanding short term or long term debts, to find out when these debts were incurred, why they were incurred, and what are the terms. Does the company have enough cash or liquid assets to take care of these short term debts? Does the future cash inflow would help taking care of the long term debts? And then what will be what will be left with the company to spend on the future development? That's what is the most important scrutinizing portion of the balance sheet. Of course, your cash situation, whether your cash is properly reconciled, what your financial statements are telling is the truth, all those are scrutinized as well. Typically, the financial experts that are hired by these companies are no longer people sitting in one geographical area. They are spread all over the world. Many countries have become the hub for very sharp, very good premier business schools, which produces very sharp individuals who are trained to look at the financials at a very, very cell level, at a very deep level, and make sure that from reading the financials, they can understand the company and the workings and the management. Um, it's very important to keep your records impeccable to make a good impact, not only to make a good impact, but to make sure that the person who is scrutinizing it gets the proper story. That brings us to keeping your internal processes impeccable as well. How you keep your procedure, how much you form the process and procedures for the company, and how you keep them impeccable sees how efficient or inefficient the company is being run. For doing due diligence in this area, the VCs would be looking for all manuals, the documentations for different processes in the company. If the company is more than 3 to 5 year old and does not have any processes in place, any internal documentation in place, then it is a red flag. If the company is less than 3 year old, if you're new, it can be passed off as the sign of youth. But in any case, it is worth having these procedures and checks and balances in place, because it will only make you look better and also help you run your company better. So cannot stress enough on how important processes are. I know Dr. Flynn said that already, so I'm repeating that. Reviewing your cash management system, that is also a very important factor in the due diligence phase. How is cash managed on a day-to-day basis? Literally or figuratively, is there a cookie jar bursting with cash and available for anybody to disburse? Not a good sign. That's a red flag. So your cash, quote to cash policies, who is dispersing, who is signing off on the checks, how the payments are being disbursed is very important. Of course, risk mitigation, having your insurances in place, that is also looked at. If your insurances are not in place, probably not a deal breaker, but it will definitely delay getting the money in. Most important of all, your human resource section is reviewed very carefully. Does the company take employees issues seriously? Are you an equal opportunity employer? What are the policies for firing, hiring, compensation, and promotions? Should not have started with firing, but Dr. Fruin said, be quick to fire, take your time to hire. So that's why I started with firing. Even if the company just has few employees, they should have some sort of policies in place so that the investors know that the company invests in their key assets, their employees. I know I've run out of time, so I open the floor to questions. I'm an interactive person regardless, so happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Vinitha. Thanks a lot for that presentation. I think it was very informative, and I'm sure a lot of people took a lot of insight from that. I do have questions already coming in. Okay, so the first question is, what are the major changes you typically see for businesses starting up in the COVID era? Is it wise to still have local business instead of transitioning to a primarily remote work-based startup?
Actually, it's, to me it is the other way around. With the pandemic, it is actually you can go anywhere. Global is the key, right? Because it doesn't matter anymore how, what are the physical distances, where you are staying, where you are operating from. Everybody is working towards it. um, I see that as a future. Even if things change and we go back to being in offices, I don't think the remote workplace is going away. People like me have gotten used to working from their pajamas, and I think that is there to stay. Maybe there'll be a balance. People would definitely want to go out, want to go back, interact, be with their colleagues, but remote workplace is here to stay, in my opinion.
Fair enough. That's actually, I agree to that as well. I don't think that's going anywhere. Okay, so another question is, will the salaries level go down due to globalization in the pandemic?
That's a great question, and it's something we would wait and watch on how that pans out. From what I'm seeing and hearing around me, uh, the salaries are being flattened. Like it is becoming more and more kind of uh, geared to where you are staying, where you are spending, which to me makes sense. Right? If you were living in an expensive area, then of course you get paid that much because you're required to live there. My own daughter, she was working in the city and now has moved out to a smaller town where she's saving money, so her pay scale was adjusted. So yes, it that will happen, and I think we can't avoid that, and I think that's the way to go regardless.
Completely fair. Thank you. And what is the proper time to hire a COO?
All right, great question. From my experience, if a key employee can grow into the position of CEO, that is very valuable, because if somebody is on board with the idea from the inception stage, that can happen. Um, that that's a very ideal situation, in my experience, in my opinion. But of course, as the company grows, then there are different aspects. The different industry experts can bring different value to the company on how the operation should be taken care of. um, it depends on the stage of the company. What are the requirements? It has to be assessed. Your needs for um, different kind of roles, including the CEO, COO, need to be assessed at different times and make the decision accordingly. I can't think of a timeline in the life cycle of a company that year three there should be a COO. I don't think. It depends on what kind of operations it is.
Sure, that's great. Thanks a lot, Vinita. We do have a lot of questions coming in currently, but we will share them via email with you, and of course, the responses with the audience who asked the question as well. So, thank you so
Thank you.
much for the presentation. And now we would be moving on to our next presenter. But before that, uh, I would like to point out that we have shared a feedback form with everybody today. And please, we request you to fill the feedback form because your insights and the kind of insights that we get from the feedback, from your feedback, are very valuable to us as well. So please go ahead, fill that feedback form for us, and help us improve the event and its entirety. Thank you. Okay, so now moving on to the next presenter. To present about fundraising, I would like to invite Dave Mullen, VC of SVB Capital.
And thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. I will be talking about venture fundraising, and hope everyone is staying warm out there. To start, wanted to break down this conversation into a few different parts. First, would love to give an overview of the milestones and expectations you used to have at varying early stage fundraising rounds. And then secondly, would love to kind of chat through ways that you can really craft your story and fine tune that narrative as you're going out for these varying milestones. And then lastly, would love to talk about competitive differentiation, as well as market mapping the VC scape. Understanding there are thousands and hundreds of capital partners you can be working with, it's important to really pick that partner right. And to that point, would like to kind of caveat this first page with 2 points. One being, everyone needs to have the conversation about whether or not venture funding is the appropriate avenue for you, right? There are a lot of alternatives out there, and for everyone, venture funding isn't right. Doesn't matter if it's high growth, doesn't matter if it's a tech business. Should really contemplate a few different considerations, which we'll run into shortly, before you kind of dive right into that. I think one of those is venture capital partnerships are very much like marriages. And I think I've heard a joke, which isn't really a joke, that oftentimes you're signing up for 10 years with someone on your board or someone really invested in your business, which outlasts many marriages in the US. The second point is the market today is very dynamic. So all of these parameters, which I'm about to outline, are very much arbitrary. Can speak in trying to find each one of these rounds, but the fact of the matter is it changes between geos, it changes between industries that you're operating in. And so take everything up here with a grain of salt. It's meant more for guidelines versus rule of thumb, and we can dive more into Q&A to the extent you have questions following this. So starting right off with 3 different early stage rounds of what the expectation should be. So in today's market, pre-seed rounds are very much pre-product. You've got an idea, you're looking to execute on it. And as you're having conversations about fundraising options, you're generally going to be communicating either your background and subject matter expertise in that specific category, or you're going to be communicating a very vast opportunity within this specific market or this specific segment. Those are really the only 2 investment criteria you can articulate at that stage in the inception of your business. Generally speaking, it's a very much friends and family type round. You'll have access to accelerators like KiwiTech, and with recent legislation, angels as well. I say that because Angel investors are becoming more and more common as regulation has eased up around restrictions around who can invest in what the qualifications are to do that. And I only think that makes it a more compelling avenue at this stage for folks. This is typically an unpriced deal. And from a dilution perspective, you should be looking at less than 10 to 20%. And I hone in on this because I think a big mistake a lot of early stage founders make. The inception of this business is giving away too much of the company. Now, as I mentioned earlier on in the conversation, this is a rule of thumb. It changes by business model, it changes by industry. Got to take everything I say with a grain of salt because your business may be very much different than others. From a seed perspective, your product is launched. It's in beta mode. Again, depends on where you fall in the software sales to either enterprise or if you're creating a consumer product. But for the most part, there's something tangible that you can really converse with when you're having financing meetings. Focus for a lot of VCs at the seed stage is going to be on any early indications of sales traction. Who have you been engaging with? Is there a pipeline? If there is a pipeline, what are the dynamics of your pipeline? How advanced are these conversations? What's the probability rate? Any other indications of product market fit? You know, if this is an open source type business model, how many users are actually engaging with your platform and at what cadence? I'd say the financing conversations you're going to be having at this stage are a variety of CVCs who are typically writing their theses, whether that's on their websites or on Medium. And I think a good way to gauge a right fit for you as an owner, as a CEO, is really honing in on what their specific thesis is and how your business falls within that. You'll also still be working with angel groups, but generally speaking, friends and family have kind of been priced out of this. This either will come in the form of a note or a priced round. So a note being as safe as very much democratized by Y Combinator, a simple agreement for future equity, which effectively is a note with the promise or a down payment, as I like to say, on a future round of financing. From a dilution perspective, 10 to 25%. Again, not so much of a rule, just an expectation. And I only bring this up because, as I mentioned earlier, I do think it's important for founders to be very thoughtful around how much of their company they're giving it away at an early stage, not just in the sense of returns for you going forward, but just in sense of control considerations in your company at this point, which is a key inflection in your business. Series C, product is scale. Excuse me, Series A, your product is scaling. So you move past formation of the specific product, of the software, what have you. You're starting to see cohort stats emerging, meaning you're able to tell, are there clients rolling off? Are there clients rolling on? Are they upselling? What are the characteristics? What's the profile of your specific consumer that you're targeting? These are the types of things that venture investors will be looking at this specific stage. This can be the first or second institutional round with a lead. So for the most part, you won't have as much of a lead on the seed round. It'll probably be a consortium of investors and angels, a party round, if you will. And then at the Series A, you're really having a venture fund step up and take control or the lead of the specific round, but pricing it and signaling to market their conviction on you, the space, the category. So now that we've covered three basic rounds that you should be contemplating at the early stage of your business, how do you go about crafting your narrative? So you basically come up with the idea, and one of the biggest missteps I think founders and CEOs make at an early stage in communicating the value of their business to CEOs is not really tying in all the foundational metrics into a narrative that is compelling. Meaning, venture investors are looking at hundreds of deals every year. And with every investment that they make, there's the opportunity cost of not investing in, say, 19, 20 other companies, either in the same category or tackling the same business. And so it's important to really communicate to a venture investor what the opportunity is here from a financial returns perspective. I think an easy, low-hanging fruit to quantify this is the total addressable market, or the TAM as it's commonly known. The reason why this is important is it helps quantify at an early stage in your business what the financial opportunity is. So for instance, $1 billion market size might seem massive. That all said, if you think about what the realistic market share in any market is that public companies have outside of, say, an Amazon, 10% is pretty massive. So if you're saying, I have $1 billion TAM to address, but realistically, you're going to take 5 to 10% of that, it's not as compelling. So a lot of venture funds and a lot of the top performing venture funds are looking for that 10 billion, 50 billion growing market opportunity. And why specifically is your business best positioned to tackle that? Other questions you should be communicating and crafting in this narrative is, why is now the right time? A misstep founders often make is, sometimes it's a great idea, but the market isn't ready for it. So what are the conversations you've had in your diligence in the formation of this idea that leads you to believe that the market is prepared, that enterprises are willing to buy, that there is an appetite and willingness to adopt this specific product set? Another great question to ask is, why you? So understanding not everyone has subject matter expertise in the specific category or sector that they're really trying to disrupt, what specifically about your background uniquely positions you to take this on, to really stand at the helm of your business and ultimately come out as the winner? And similarly to that, why this problem? Why, given your background, why given the opportunity set in market, is this the problem you're tackling? And how that ties into the time, your background, and the overall TAM. And again, I say all of these questions because oftentimes it's not really packaged together in a coherent storytelling that is compelling to VCs. I think another overlooked area of owners and CEOs when they're going to market is what exactly the capital needs are and where you will be allocating that. So for instance, folks will come out and say, I'm raising a $1 million seed round. But when probed why $1 million or what specifically that will get them to, there's not really a great answer. And so I think one way to differentiate yourself in the story of your business is to really hone in on, this $1 million is going to get me to this exact place in my business life cycle. We're either going to hit this specific number of new clients, or if we're really developing the product and we're heads down on the tech capabilities and uniqueness in that capacity, this is exactly what those features will look like in, say, a year and a half when we're going to go back and raise our next round. I also feel like this specific narrative helps inform the investors that you're thinking ahead. This is someone who's very thoughtful about the capital coming in, and they've got a plan. I think another very interesting point to this effect is, what are the KPIs to your business? Where are they at now, and where will they be at the varying milestones of product development or within the actual capital deployments once you've closed, say, your Series A in this example? So for instance, if you're a consumer company, as we mentioned before, what are the MAUs, monthly active users? What are the daily active users? What is expected engagement? How will this capital get us there in terms of, maybe that's, we're going to broaden our channels through Facebook and Instagram, or maybe we're going to preserve capital, given that's getting a little bit more expensive, and spend that on more organic marketing, say podcasts, and building out our thought leadership that'll really buy us credibility in market, say for a more nuanced type enterprise software product. And then again, speaking to product roadmap, what specifically is that product now, and where will it look, say, a year or two from now? And before we kind of move on to the next page here, I do want to say, again, in quantifying the TAM, you're not always going to be able to Google online, say, TAM for specific insurtech startup, or what is the TAM for my product? Because oftentimes you're disrupting an industry or you're creating something brand new. So I find it helpful to use a bottoms-up approach and really kind of check that with the tops down. Bottoms up meaning, if this is my expected, as simple as this is my expected pricing per product, and this is the amount of available, say, mid-market businesses in the US, which is my initial target audience, this is generally speaking what we would expect in annual revenue or the total addressable market per year. And then tops down being, this is generally what overall spending on this category has been historically, kind of finding a middle ground between those two. And of course, citing your sources there because you will be probed on that in all likelihood. So additional considerations. From a competitive positioning perspective, what makes you and your team uniquely qualified to come out on top here? So we spoke to this earlier, but again, at an earlier stage, particularly pre-seed, the seed round, and even Series A, oftentimes the biggest differentiator are your willingness and ability to execute. So how have you proven that out in the past? What have been the roles that you've done? I think one of the key spoken to or under communicated things that VCs really like to see is the passion as well. So coupling your unique capabilities with a passion for the category really create a compelling story. So for instance, you may not be an expert or you may not have 25 years experience in, I'll use the insurance market again, but you may have a passion for it. And communicating ways that you have expressed that passion or you've manifested that passion in your personal life, I think is very, very important and goes a long way in terms of we're deploying our capital to this CEO, to this business owner. And for that, he may not have 20 years experience, but there's a lot of passion there and it exudes it on the phone and he's going to be able to sell this and raise capital going forward, which is a chief consideration in the viability of any business is this executive officer, is the management team going to continue to be able to raise capital going forward? And you can get a really good feel for that on calls with CEOs within 30 minutes or an hour, whatever that is for you. Other key competitive positioning points, what is the distribution you have, right? So speaking to, say, again, insurance, you look at the valuation differentials between, say, a Lemonade or a Root, and a function of the differential of Lemonade trading a little bit higher than Root, or its unique access to consumers. They're owning the consumer, they're owning their product. That's a huge difference when it comes to a very competitive industry, because when you have access to that channel directly, you're not reliant on any partners to facilitate that interaction, not reliant on increasing costs associated with marketing your product, because you have that direct relationship. I think that really touches across categories is how are we uniquely positioned to engage with our consumer, whether it's a company or a person that our competitors aren't. And what does that engagement look like going forward? What unique insights can you bring? So again, specifically as you're leading a company in a nuanced industry, or you're disrupting an existing industry, what specifically can you differentiate yourself as a management team relative to others doing the same thing in the category? And then network advantages. I think the experience is important for a reason. Outside of just knowing an industry and having general expertise in products and trends and what have you, you've generally built a network up. Network of buyers, network of colleagues to partner with on product development, network of folks to really go out early on in the stages of product development to vet out attention to detail in terms of what our consumers or enterprises going to want to see here. So following up with that, navigating the venture scape. So you've really thought about all of these things, how we're going to communicate the difference for us, what the vision is, how this story really is interconnected and with all of this. Now we have to go out and pick a partner. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this, it's like a marriage. Oftentimes these will be 5-10-year relationships. And it's important that, one, you consider their expertise, but also the ability to work with them down the road. So how do you go about market mapping the VC scape? I think one thing that's overlooked in this specific segment of your diligence in kind of seeking out these partners at the Series A, sometimes seed rounds, are the over focus on a fund versus the GP, because oftentimes there's variability with GPs within a venture fund. And just to clarify, GP is general partner, or those that are writing the checks within their venture funds. And that may range from the companies and sectors of interest to them, to their experiences, to their working style. So there may be top tier venture funds throughout a specific category, say again, insurance, but you want to hone in on a venture partner who, one, understands what your specific business is, has proven that out not only in prior investments, maybe adjacent to this space or their operating goals in life, but what they've done when they've sat on those boards for their customers. So, you know, oftentimes when you're closing your venture rounds with GPs, they're going to do diligence on the customers that you're working with. You should do the same. You should diligence these GPs with the companies they've worked with in the past, whether that's kind of asking for actual references from these GPs, or just doing your own diligence, researching the companies they've been on and really reaching out to them about their experience working with this person. You know, for things you should be asking or things you should be cognizant of, or what are the introductions they were able to make? 2, what were their interactions like on the board? What's their leadership style? Are they leading from the top? Are they kind of in the trenches with you? What happened when things went awry with my business? Were they there for you? Did they kind of give you the cold shoulder? Important things to be thoughtful of. Kind of taking a step back as you're looking at the broader venture funds, that's the umbrella over the GPs. You know, what are their just general resources? You take an Andreessen Horowitz, for instance. They have a full-on platform where they're not only connecting you to corporates, but they're, for instance, connecting you with folks who you need to kind of move your business forward, whether that's a growth officer, whether that's a VP of finance, whether that's sales folks, whatever it is, they maintain resources for you. And, you know, Andreessen may provide all of this, but a lot of funds are focused on one specific area of that. You know, certain accelerators have kind of corporate matchmaking. That may be important to you, or it may not. Certain funds have expertise in matching you with the right types of data science professionals. As we all know, that's a very challenging role to fill. So really be thoughtful at vetting out what that specific value add is and what the core needs of your business are over the next few years. Lastly, you know, you're busy. No one wants to go out and be raising capital all day long. You're starting a business for a reason. You want to do just that, start your business. You want to develop the product. You want to be out in the market selling it. So be efficient with your time. You know, it's the spray and pay method is not always the best way to do it, in the sense that all VC dollars are not the same. Some VCs, it's dead on arrival in the sense that they're already invested in one of a very similar company. And while there's not a science around what VCs can invest in from a competitive perspective, generally speaking, it's at a courtesy to their existing portfolio companies. They're not going to invest in a direct competitor. So do your homework up front so you're not wasting your time on the specific venture investors you're targeting and spending hours and hours a week away from your business on. Now, I prepared these 3 pages. I know there's typically a lot of nuanced questions. As I mentioned in the beginning, fundraising can be quite dynamic. It can be quite flexible. So wanted to maybe start and open it up a little bit early for Q&A, if that's okay. And happy to answer questions as they come in.
All right, thank you, Dave. Thanks a lot. That was a great presentation. I think a lot of founders can gain a lot of knowledge from there and take a lot of insights as well. Okay, we already have a lot of questions that have come in while you were presenting. So the first question is, as someone whose friends and family don't really have accessible revenue for investment, how is it best to gain access to pre-seed angels, HNWI, high net worth individuals who will come in at that very early stage?
Yeah, so for those that don't have access to high net worth individuals, I'd say friends and family isn't necessarily the most optimal route to begin with, in the sense that, you know, they're giving you capital, but not necessarily the resources, which is why when I'm sitting on boards or I'm advising companies, I always like to tell them to start with accelerators, because accelerators are built out for just that. They take chances on companies at a very early stage, and they provide the resources you need and you can't necessarily get from friends and family. And there are plenty of accelerators popping up all over the place that, similar to the VC conversation I just mentioned, provide specific nuanced services based on what your needs are. And typically they'll write larger checks that are just keep your cap table a little bit more streamlined than having, say, 20 different folks from throughout your life writing different check sizes. And again, at an early stage, that just brings complexity with it in terms of how you should be thinking about ownership legally, how you should be thinking about communicating with all of them. They all might have different wants and needs in terms of information rights. So I typically advise companies to start off early. If you don't have that friends and family network, just go with the accelerator. It's easy, keep the cap table clean, benefit from the resources.
Great. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Hopefully that should help. Okay, so the next question is resources. So what are some examples of resources to find the best why now for the investors?
To find the best why now? So I guess in the context of what I presented, why now, I think it's important to show some willingness of corporates to adopt. So I'll say, for instance, one of the things that I do when I market map is there's a lot of great free information out there from, say, consulting firms like McKinsey, where, for instance, they'll come out with a report on the future of data in real estate. As we all know, real estate's very slow moving, particularly commercial on the tech adoption side. But recent reports indicate that in a survey of 200 CIOs at the top REITs in the country, that to all of them, 75% are focused on finding a data solution over the next 2 years. That's a kind of communication that VCs want to see. Okay, wow, CEOs are willing and proactive about looking for the specific solution set. And you have the kind of McKinsey or insert consulting logo here backing behind it to really prove out to anyone looking to invest in your company that this is a real problem. People are focused on it, and there's a willingness to buy this over the next few years.
All right, great. So another question that is, so as a founder taking no salary for months while trying to get the business or the product launched, app-based company, so is it appropriate to incorporate a degree of personal cost covering in a pre-seed or a seed ask?
So I'd say, your personal costs, it varies and it gets complex. It's an art versus a science here. To founders, I encourage them always, financing first, obviously easier said than done versus kind of going broke for your specific company. And I think there's ways to bootleg it in the sense that, offering up developers, if that's a huge cost for you, equity ownership, or if there's a rent component, starting a company virtually. I think there's just at every line item of your P&L, a way to figure out a free alternative, or at least offer up a little bit of equity to those on your team in particular, to kind of take a bet on the company and prove out their conviction in what you guys are doing.
That's fair enough. Thank you so much for the responses. We do have a lot of questions that have come in, but unfortunately we can't address them right now, but we'll definitely be sharing them via email with you, Dave, and obviously the responses with the audience who asked the questions as well. So thanks a lot for your time today. And I think it was very insightful for a lot of founders, I'm sure. And thank you so much. And we're glad we had you as well. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Also for the audience, the feedback form, we do have the feedback form. Please do fill out the feedback form. You can also request a one-on-one consulting session with the mentors via the feedback form. So definitely go ahead and fill in the feedback form. It does help us a lot as well. Okay, and for the audience, now please get just wanted to get your attention towards your screens. We do have a lot of upcoming events in the month of November and December as well. We have 3 back-to-back great events lined up on November 17th, 18th, and 19th. We hope to see you there as well. And then a couple of more demo days that we have planned as well. So we really hope to have you join us there. And I hope you guys had as much fun as we did bringing it to you. And Thank you so much for everybody in the audience for joining us today, and to all our presenters for the great insights that we had today. So hope to see you in the next on our next event, upcoming events. Thank you so much for joining in. Stay safe and stay healthy. Please take care. Thank you.